Really excited today to have our first guest from America. Not just from America though, from the Gambino crime family. And a question that a lot of people are wondering that's been sent in about this is to ask John, Alite, what do you think of the representation of Mafia in movies and like Netflix versus the real deal?
Well, you know, a couple of times over the years, people ask me the question on a private level between friends and guys from the street. And, you know, some of my friends and gangsters are here in the UK. So, you know, we maintain long relationships. I think those relationships as friends is, that's the close knit for any kind of organization to be loyal to each other. But when you get into organizations like I was involved, I think there is no loyalty. There's just treachery.
So what's your favorite gangster movie?
You know, I've been watching, you know, I'm a big guy that comes to your country now a lot. I've been watching Peaky Blinders a lot. so
that's my parents' favorite.
The Shelby family. And, you know, they talk about my friend, the Sabini. So, you know, I'm very close with Terry for a lot of years. So it piqued my interest to watch a little bit of it. And we joke about it a lot, me and Terry.
So all-time favorite American Mafia actor?
American actor would have to be, I would say, Al Pacino. But UK actor would have to be, without a doubt, Tom Hardy. I think he's a great actor, fantastic. I'm a big fan of his. So
yeah. Favorite De Niro movie?
It would have to be Bronx Tale.
Bronx Tale. So I read your book, Darkest Hours, all the early stuff, all the high school years and stuff. There were some pivotal moments in your life. You were coming up as a kid and you were put in a boxing match with someone who was way older than you. Can you give us that story, please?
Yeah, you know, my father, I was more afraid of my father backing down at the fights than losing a fight to a kid. So they put me in with a kid that was very good with his hands. I wasn't ready to fight him, but I was too stupid to say no, I wouldn't go in the ring, and I went in the ring.
Well, how old was he versus your age?
I guess I was about 9 or 10 at the time. I think he was about 13 or 14. But it really wasn't the age in boxing, it's the experience. So, you know, the kid had a lot of experience. He was very fast with his hands. He was elusive with his feet. And, you know, I just wasn't nowhere near that standard yet. I was just a straight ahead young kid fighting that got hit a lot. And I definitely got hit a lot that day.
So you did it for your dad to be proud, though?
Well, if he would have known, you know, I was just telling somebody last night the story. I fought a guy, and a big guy when I was a kid, and I was giving it to him a little bit. And I had the bright idea of throwing him on the floor. Well, I made a mistake, and he fell on top of me. And, my friends were there, and they wanted to break it up, and I wouldn't allow them. And while the kid pummeled me, he was crying. And he just kept begging me, can you stop now? And I was all bloody, and I wouldn't stop, and I wouldn't let my friends jump in because my father wouldn't allow something like that. And, you know, I know the guy still, and we joke still. I said, you know, if eventually some adults came by and stopped it, or you'd probably still be beating me up.
So your relationship with your father was really pivotal to your character development as a hustler. He was a gambler. Can you describe how you got into that with him?
Yeah, my dad liked to, there's a lot of pictures actually, photographs when we're kids. He's teaching us to play dice, and he's teaching us to play blackjack, and he's teaching us, you know, games of poker and things like that. But he loved the horses at that time when I was younger. In younger days, he loved the horses, and he always had schemes. And so when he went to poker games, you know, I played a lot of baseball, and we had signals. So it was kind of easy for me to pick up, and I'd be at the games, and they were, you know, games at different people's locations, underground games, and I'd signal him of what hands everybody had, and these guys really figured it out. He was just a little kid that, you know, and I have no idea what's going on, and it's not typical for a 6 or 7 year old kid to have the ability to know cards. So I would signal him, and if I signaled him wrong and we went home, you know, he would chastise me like crazy. You lost a lot of money. That part, you know, I'm still a kid that didn't understand the amount of money they were betting.
Because you were creeping around the tables behind the card players.
Yeah.
What were the signals you had with your dad?
Well, you know, in baseball, we used to have the signal clear something was across the head.
Yeah.
You touch your left arm, it was the bunt. Touch the right arm, it's the steal the base. Hit and run is across the chest. So those same type of signals we had for cards. And, you know, the same thing with the horses. You know, they used to post bet. So in other words, they didn't have bookies back then. that had the timeline. So if you got a bookie that was not experienced, and the race went off, say at 120, we would call it in at 121 when the race was already over. But we had a chain of guys. It would be my brother or me at the finish line, and we'd run the horses to the next guy and scream the numbers, and I'd yell it to my father, and the other guy would yell it over the fence because they didn't have the phones weren't in the tracks in those days. And he'd call it into a sucker, sucker bookie, and we'd beat him. So he taught us all these little schemes.
That's a guarantee, isn't it? You can't get that
guarantee
wrong,
winning, but he still lost somehow. I don't know too many gamblers out right now. I got to tell you the truth. But I got smart. I learned. I became the bookie instead.
Yeah. And when you were doing the table thing, I mean, the rest of the other people they wouldn't suspect the kid doing that, would they?
Once or twice a guy would say, "Hey, what's your kid doing?" But for the most part, nah. And if anybody said that, the rest of the guys would tell him, "Shut the fuck up,"
Yeah, exactly.
So, he's a kid, right?
Yeah.
So the neighborhood you grew up in then, what was that? What was it like?
I grew up playing baseball with Fat Andy Ruggiano's son Albert was our coach, and his son Anthony was around. So that was my neighborhood guys, and as a kid, they groomed me. And the father I looked up was a gangster. He was a guy that people know about the mob. He was straightened out by Albert Anastasia, Murder Incorporated. So as a kid, most people don't know who that is. They know who Mickey Mantle is for the Yankees. But I knew who these guys were because I was raised around Fat Andy, and he was my, idol, and his son Albert was my idol, and Anthony was around, obviously a little older than Albert, but Albert was my coach. So I'd look up to these guys and say, man, I'm going to be like them.
Did you find the sports kept you out of trouble? Give you discipline?
Well, I guess not. I started using the baseball bat for other reasons. Listen, you go in a direction that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
So I got accustomed to getting beat up. I got accustomed being around gangsters, and I got accustomed being comfortable about the way they handled themselves, and I started copying them. I started smoking cigars at a young age. I didn't smoke cigarettes. And my father would catch me and slap me around and hit me in the head. But meanwhile, he was smoking, and
Yeah.
So it's a comfort level. A guy, Lou Romano, I always speak about him. He's a writer in the States, and he did a book called On Zip Codes. Mm-hmm. So it depends on what area you live, and it's the way you're going to behave. And where I grew up, it was gangster heaven, haven. So that's what I try to become.
And what was your dad's attitude towards that as he saw you slip into that?
My dad, I love my father. He's in a nursing home right now, and he's just the same way. He's even a nurse. He doesn't understand things, but he's so tough. So sometimes he's still yelling at me now, even from a wheelchair, and But my dad would try to keep me away from it, but he also brought me to it. He just thought I could be like him. I would stay away from it, gamble a little bit, hang around a little bit, and that's it. And his judgment was, I guess, he judged it wrong a little bit, and I went completely the other way. I followed some guys like Charlie Luciano, Blackie Luciano was his nickname. He was a Gambino guy, and I followed guys like Fat Andy Ruggiano, who were quiet guys. They were nice guys, gentlemen. They loved the kids. They come to all the games, but they were tough guys, and I wanted to be just like them.
So just going back to your childhood a bit then, just to get more about your character development. So if your dad came home and he'd lost at the table, what was the mood like in the house then?
Hey, my father used to throw the kitchen table over all the time and through the wall and through the windows. And if he didn't have his Italian bread on the table, I'm Albanian, and I come from a very Albanian family. We were raised in one household, my grandparents, everybody in one household, uncles, cousins. And they would hear it downstairs, upstairs, and they'd say, oh, there he goes again. He must have lost tonight. So when he didn't have that Italian bread salad, we knew he lost something because that table went flying. And he was just a typical, gamblers are typical. They get the winning streaks, and, everything's great. And he'd call us up and say, get ready. We're going to go to the Met game tonight, because Shea Stadium, Citi Field, was near my house. So that was the treat. And he'd bet on some games, and we'd go to the game. But when he was on a losing streak, he'd stay out of his way because his hands were swinging. So
did that create anxiety in you as a kid in that household?
Honestly, it must have, because I think I was still pissing in my pants in bed until about 11 years old. And, even some of my friends, they used to tease me, joke, and I would say, I don't know why the fuck I can't control it, and you know, as a kid, you're embarrassed. Now, as an adult, you laugh about it and you say, but I guess some of these things attribute to it. The way I speak, I always spoke with vocal cords, false vocal cords. I have a very hoarse voice, and I went to therapy for it. Actually, it's better now. I used to sound like a real frog as a kid. So some of those things, I guess, took a toll without me knowing, yeah.
So we've talked about your relationship with your dad. What about your relationship with your mum?
Yeah, I had a great relationship with my dad. I grew up like a gangster, I guess, even though I didn't realize it was a man's world. And I was Albanian, so the women didn't have much say. They cleaned the house. They had their girlfriends over, and family, mostly all Albanians, not outside Americans, as typical family had. And my mom if she asked me a question, I always tell her the same: mind your business, don't ask me. And she used to get mad at me, but I guess I had a normal relationship with my mom, but more distant than my father. I love both parents, but I was just raised as a street guy.
So your mum was Albanian, your dad was Italian?
No, both Albanian.
Oh, both Albanian?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was raised by mostly Italians, and I was Albanian, but my area of guys I stayed with were all Italian, and stuff like that. But
the Albanians, like, they are very traditional, aren't they? Like, say, you live with your uncles. It might be a big house, but your uncles are upstairs, and you could have 4 or 5 different families in there. Do you ever, did that cause any arguments, or were you a close family?
No, we had a pretty close family. I had my uncle upstairs with my we say habla, and down in the middle were us, and then the basement, on the first floor, my grandparents, in the basement, my other uncle, my father's brother, and his wife. And next door, cousins, across street cousins. And when you come in the house, you take your shoes off, which we use kaputs as meaning for shoes, and you leave it at the front door. You don't track people and friends in and out of your house. It was something that my family didn't like, and it was kind of a traditional thing with Albanians. This is your home. This is your privacy.
That's respect,
yeah, it's a big respect with the Albanian community. I have a lot of respect. I mean, my body's tattooed with Albanian tattoos all over it, and I was raised traditionally in an Albanian family.